Welcome to Episode 2 of You Like Jazz, a Utah Jazz podcast presented by ThreewindSports, and today we are going to be covering all NBA selections and snubs, more importantly snubs, some potential trade targets this offseason, and what I think the Jazz should do in this year's NBA draft. So with all that being said, let's get right into it. Alright, first thing I want to do is quickly address last episode, and more specifically the audio issues. When I listened on a phone or on a computer with headphones in, it sounded fine. When I listened on speakers, you could clearly hear where it gets quieter and then louder. And the reason why it does that is because of all the bumping sounds when you say P's or B's, and it pops. And so I got rid of all those and made it quieter during all those. And you can hear that on speakers. Can't really hear it on headphones, but nonetheless, I wanted to address that. I'm going to try to fix that this go around. Now, like I said last time, I'm going to say it again, still pretty sick with allergies, and so I am going to be sounding like I'm talking through a funnel for most of this episode or breathing really hard. Trust me, I'll be all right eventually. But yeah, that's all of the pre-show announcements and or testimonials I have to make. Enjoy. All right, let's hop right into it with all NBA selections and snubs. The first thing I want to talk about is Donovan Mitchell making the second team. One could argue that he deserved the first team over SGA. One could also argue that I shouldn't even be talking about Donovan Mitchell, but I feel like on this Utah Jazz podcast, we have to talk about guys like Donovan Mitchell. I actually think he did deserve first team over SGA. Look, SGA was great. I'm a Kentucky fan, and I love SGA. I actually like SGA more than I like Donovan Mitchell. The thing is that SGA got those stats on an Oklahoma City Thunder team that was atrocious for most of the season. They eventually picked it up and actually got into the play-in, but for a while there they were really bad, and so he was getting a lot of those stats on nights where it was pretty easy for him to get those. So Donovan Mitchell had pretty similar stats to him. SGA stats looked a little bit better, but I think at the end of the day, Donovan Mitchell's were more impressive just because the team he was playing on was much better. He had to share the ball with more people. You won't find me defending Donovan Mitchell on many occasions, but in this one in particular, I think Donovan Mitchell probably deserved the first team, but I'm not mad about SGA making it, and I'm not mad about Donovan Mitchell making the second team. I think he played better this year than he ever did in Utah just because he didn't like being in Utah. Real quick, let me talk about Walker Kessler making the all-rookie first team. I think we all just knew this was going to happen. There really wasn't another center that stood a chance on making the all-rookie first team over Kessler. Congratulations to him. I absolutely love Walker Kessler. So looking forward to what he's going to do in the future and make more all-NBA teams and Defensive Player of the Years, which I think is almost a lock if he doesn't get hurt. Now to talk about the important thing, the reason that I put the all-NBA discussion on today's show is because Lauri Markannen was snubbed off of the third team. And the two forward spots for the third team were taken up by LeBron, who I'm not even going to talk about. I don't think he deserved it over Lauri. I think Lauri had a better season than LeBron, but we know he's going to make it every year. It's LeBron. As long as people are voting on this stuff, LeBron's going to make it. So there's no point in even discussing that. The person that I want to discuss about getting third team over Lauri and snubbing Lauri off of the All-NBA teams was Julius Randle. Julius Randle did not deserve this over Lauri Markannen. Their stats are almost identical, but the efficiency is just a different level for Lauri, whereas Julius Randle is one of the most inefficient players in the NBA. And I think you can look at the stats all day and maybe make a case for Randle, but the moment you watch these guys play with your own eyes, you realize how big of a gap it is. It really is. And you see that right now in the playoffs with Randle, who is atrocious, who has been absolutely god-awful in these playoffs. That dude is one of the hardest basketball players to watch I've ever seen. He is so inefficient. He's a shot chucker. He is the last player you want on your team, and the reason why his stats look good is because he takes 1,000,000 shots a game. He also turns the ball over 1,000,000 times a game. He's just not a good basketball player. He's one of those guys that's only in the NBA because he's big and athletic. He's just not a very good basketball player versus Lauri, who also big and athletic. Much higher IQ, much more efficient, just a better basketball player. I think that is absolutely ridiculous that Julius Randle got third team over Lauri Markannen. The only thing that's a positive out of this is that I'm pretty sure if you make an All-NBA team, you're eligible for the Supermax. So we don't have to pay Lauri the Supermax now, which I wouldn't mind paying Lauri the Supermax. I think he's going to be a great player for years, but nevertheless, we don't have to pay him that much. We probably still will. That's all I have to talk about for the All-NBA teams. Now on to the trade targets. I put 4 trade targets down from just mix and match articles that I found, and I'm going to go through all 4 of them. I'm going to go from my least favorite to my favorite and give you my opinions on each. The first one is Pascal Siakam. I'm not 100% sure how this would work. I assume Lauri would play the 3, but I don't absolutely hate it. Pascal Siakam's obviously a great player, and I've been on the Pascal Siakam train for a long time. I think he deserved third team over Julius Randle as well. I don't think he played as good as Lauri this year, but I think he was definitely better than Julius Randle. For the most part, if you put him at the 4, Lauri at the 3, I think it would work great. He's a little outside of the timeline. He's the oldest person out of these 4 people, but he's not out of his prime. He's only 29. He probably has about 3 more years of prime. But with this young Utah Jazz team, do you want a guy who's going to give you 3 years, or do you want a guy who's going to give you 6, 7 years? So Pascal Siakam is my 4th favorite trade target for the Jazz this offseason. If we got him, we got him. If we don't, I'm not going to sweat it. My 3rd person is Zach LaVine, who is the lesser version of my number 1 player, who I'm going to talk about in a little bit. He's a great offensive piece, but he's a defensive liability. And just like Siakam, he's a little outside the timeline. He's 28, which, again, you're probably going to get about 3 more years of him at his athletic peak. And then he's going to start going downhill because at the end of the day, he's another one of those guys that strives off of his athleticism. He gets to 31, 32, and that's going to start going the other way. But for the most part, I think he would be a good offensive piece for Lauri to pair with Lauri. And, he's a good player. Everybody knows Zach LaVine's a good player. But at the end of the day, do I see him on the Jazz? No, not really. All right. My second favorite, my runner-up for these trade targets is LaMelo Ball, which is a very interesting thing to think about because he's only been in the league for a couple of years. When you talk about guys that fit the timeline, boom, LaMelo Ball, perfect. I don't think Charlotte would give him up already, but you never know. For a place like Charlotte, I could definitely see them giving up somebody they probably shouldn't. And Utah desperately needs a point guard with playmaking abilities. First off, we desperately need a point guard. Just in general, our point guard play has been atrocious. We, more than anything, need a point guard who can pass the ball, play make, get Lauri better shots. So I think LaMelo Ball would fit the team perfectly. The only reason he's second on this is because, A, he's a bit of a defensive liability. I actually don't think he's that bad on defense when he tries, but for the most part, he doesn't try. And then B, I just don't think Charlotte's going to trade him, and they're going to ask for a lot. And I know we have a lot, but do I really want to give all that much for LaMelo Ball? Probably not. But still, nonetheless, he's second on our trade target list. And then first, and the only guy that I would really be interested in seriously pursuing this offseason is Jaylen Brown. Talk about a perfect pair with Lauri. We've known this for a long time, how good of a defender he is, right? And obviously how good of an offensive talent he is. He's one of the best defensive, offensive players in the league, one of the best dual threats in the league. And I think a team like Utah, who not the greatest defensive team this year, would benefit greatly from him. So I think you seriously pursue him this offseason. If we could get him and then draft a point guard with, not horrible defensive metrics, then you're looking at a really, really solid team next year. I know I gave the potential starting lineup in the last episode, but that was without trades. That was with just free agency signing. I think you could build a much better starting lineup through trades, and I think that starts with somebody like Jaylen Brown. And so do I think he would fit in Utah? No. From a personal outside of basketball standpoint, I don't think he would fit in Utah. I think he would hate it there. But from a basketball standpoint, and if this is a basketball podcast, I think he would be an absolute fantastic fit on the floor. Let's take a quick break from the action to give you a message from our presenting sponsor, ThreewindSports. ThreewindSports is a multimedia sports entertainment network. We have a blog, podcasts, YouTube videos, everything you can imagine, and we're coming out with a ton of new stuff in the upcoming year. Make sure you follow us on all of our social medias, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube at ThreewindSports to get all of our content when it comes out. Thank you guys for listening. Back to the action. All right, let's jump over to the NBA draft. I think this is probably the juiciest section of today's episode. This year we have 3 picks. We have our own, which will be our highest. We have Minnesota's, which will be our second highest. Those will probably both be in the lottery. The Minnesota one might barely fall out, but for the most part, those are probably both in the lottery. And then we have Phillies, which late first round, mid-20s probably. When it comes to the Philly pick, and that's the one I'm going to talk about first just because it's the least valuable, I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about it. I think if we could put it in a trade package for one of those guys I talked about earlier, that's probably the best thing we could do with that pick. If we are going to use it, I would say probably play it safe, maybe take a wing, take someone with some upside, a high ceiling, do a Oklahoma City Thunder kind of thing where you get one of these guys that you can sit on the bench, play here and there, develop, and then they're good way down the line. Or you could take a chance on someone like Nick Smith Jr., who played for Arkansas, who was injured for most of the year, who was supposed to be a top 5 pick at the beginning of the year, but got injured, so he didn't. So now he's on most mock drafts as a mid-20 first-round pick. I think that's a guy you could take a chance on. Would we need him? Would we need another guard after these guys I'm about to talk about? I'm not 100% sure, but I think he would be someone to seriously look at if we decide to take that pick. All right, let's talk about the Utah pick. It's our most valuable pick. It'll be mid-lottery, probably anywhere from around 6 to 10. Maybe 6. Yeah, that's where I would put it, about 6 to 10. I have 2 picks that I really want. We're going to start with Cason Wallace, who is the top defensive point guard in the draft with solid offensive capabilities. This guy I watched play all year for Kentucky. He was the only shining star on this Kentucky team that made me happy every time I watched him, because the effort that he gives on defense is something that you just love to see from a prospect. He's a seriously good defender, and I think if we could get this guy, put some defense in our lineup, I think he would start on day one, first off, and just enhance our defensive abilities tenfold. He's also not bad on offense. Like, he's a good offensive player. He's a good shooter. He's a good playmaker. He's just an all-around good prospect, but he's significantly better on defense than all the other point guards in this draft. I think you probably take him with that pick. If I was in the front office in Utah, that's probably who I would take. Then my backup, if Cason Wallace is gone or if something comes out between now and the draft that we really like from this guy, Anthony Black, the point guard for Arkansas, huge point guard. He's like 6'8", with high basketball IQ and playmaking abilities. He's a really good passer, a really good offensive player, good scorer, and obviously he's 6'8", long, athletic. He has the defensive upside that you like to see from big guys like that. I think in today's NBA, these big players, these Josh Giddey types, that would almost be who I compare him to coming in, is way more valuable than these smaller point guards. And the only reason I want Cason Wallace over Anthony Black is because of the defensive output that I've seen with my own eyes, not the ceiling. I think Anthony Black's ceiling is higher, but I just love Cason Wallace's defense. But overall, if you took Anthony Black, I would not be upset. He's the better offensive prospect, and he's massive. He's like 6'8" point guard. Can't go wrong with that. All right, and then with the Minnesota pick, it's probably going to be late lottery to right outside of the lottery. We're looking anywhere from about 13 to 16 here for this pick. I have two prospects for this pick as well, and they're both very raw French prospects, actually. The first one I have is Ryan Rupert, who is a lanky wing with, like Wallace, a ton of defensive upside. I think you take this guy for defense. I've watched his tape. Again, pretty raw. Not as raw as the other guy I'm about to talk about, but pretty raw. And I just love the way he's built. His defensive upside, his defensive ceiling, through the roof. Again, long-term prospect, long-term project. I mean, someone that, if he develops right, could be an all-star, a future all-star, one of the better players on this team, and someone who's going to run that 3 for you if Lauri runs that 4 down the line. Then we look at, and I'm sorry if I say this wrong, Bilal Coulibaly. I've watched some of his tape, but I can never get his last name right. Again, another raw French prospect, probably a higher ceiling than Rupert, actually, but a much longer-term prospect. He's just more raw. Very similar build, lanky, 6'8"-ish wing. This guy is someone that you sit on your bench, you develop, and then they come out of the woodwork way down the line, and they're great. I could definitely see Bilal doing that. For the time being, I would probably go with Rupert, but Coulibaly, very good French raw prospect, and I've watched his tape. I like him too. My perfect picks, if I were to take all 3 picks, I would go honestly, for that Utah pick, that top pick, I would go Case and Wallace, but Anthony Black is very, very close. And then I would take Ryan Rupert, and then I would, in a perfect world, I'd trade the third pick. But if you're going to take it, I would take Nick Smith Jr. or another wing if someone like Koulibaly is still on the board at 23-24. I think that's all I have to talk about in today's episode. 17-ish minutes as of right now, pre-edit, so a good little chunk of time there. But yeah, that's all I have to talk about. Thank you for listening to You Like Jazz, a Utah Jazz podcast presented by ThreewindSports. Make sure you follow us on all of our social medias on Twitter and Instagram at You Like Jazz Pod. That's You Like Jazz Pod. Or follow ThreewindSports on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube at ThreewindSports. Spell it out.